Hi, my name is Jody Melton, and I just finished watching the video for the needs and challenges of disaster. And I will say this video was very eye-opening for me. Although I've not experienced a disaster personally like Katrina or a fire or anything like that. I was simply one of the thousands of people that came into the city after Katrina hit just to help rebuild. And although it was months later after the disaster, the city was not functioning like it was before. Um, Places still were not open. Many homes were still not rebuilt, they had not been cleaned out. It still was heartbreaking to see. And I can remember talking with some of the people, and we just stayed in a local hotel. And there were still so many needs that the people were facing on a daily basis just when we were there. And there were so many other challenges that they were still facing. And so as I watched this video, that's one thing that I kept thinking of is like, when I was there, what did I experience talking with the people that were still trying to recover? And so I realized that in the heroic phase, the needs and the challenges are still there. Survivors of the disaster will oftentimes deny the impact of the disaster on themselves and their family. They'll deny the disaster, how bad it was on their home. And so the denial is that challenging and a difficult part in the heroic phase. Survivors are really not looking long term during this phase, during this season of life that they're in the heroic phase. And so for survivors to look long term, that's a huge challenge, because everywhere they look, they see the disaster and they see the effects of the disaster all around them. Everything that they've known, maybe their whole lives, has been destroyed. Their physical home, their physical places that they went, but then also their community and the people around them that they've spent their lives with are all gone now. And so while the survivors are hurting, they're also struggling with denial. They're not looking long term. But this is also a unique time because there seems to be, in these moments, a greater openness to hearing about the truth of the gospel and hearing about Jesus, and churches have the opportunity right in front of them to make a kingdom impact. But also the survivors notice who's there helping them. And so oftentimes those conversations are open because they have had a need met them along the way. They needed their house worked on, and somebody helped meet that need. And while they were meeting that need with the survivors, a conversation was started. And so then the next phase we get into is the honeymoon phase. And when we hear the term honeymoon phase, we often think of like fun and exciting and all the newness of that season when we hear a honeymoon phase. But this is not the case. This is embarking into a new season when at this point it's the people are actually seeing the reality of the devastation, and their current reality is their new normal, and trying to see that and continue life as it is. And then the crash hits when the reality of what's ahead of them, this long road of recovery, that's when the crash hits, is when they see and they finally realize this is not a quick fix. To recognize and to understand what all was lost in the disaster. Oftentimes we just think of a physical home or buildings or material possessions, but we can also think of their community, kiddos' baseball teams and their basketball teams and their schools. All of those friends that they've had, those kiddos is now gone. Young families, the friends that they did life with, the friends that they went to the parks with, all that is gone. Because maybe people had to move or whatever has happened, or some have even lost their lives in the disaster. And so in this honeymoon phase, it's a unique time because joy and grief can coexist at the same time in this. And joy because of looking at the gratitude, looking at the people helping, understanding that hope is in Christ and hope is always there, that things will be okay. It will be different, but it will be okay. So they can have joy, but then they can also have grief because of what they've lost. Like I said, not just material things, but maybe some family members' lives were lost. Their whole community is vastly different now, and there's a time to grieve that as well. And so one thing to remember would be to try to normalize all of these feelings and emotions, that joy and grief can coexist at the same time. And that's normal. Everyone in this situation that experiences disaster is feeling the same thing. And so using that as a springboard, we're all feeling this. So let's walk through this together. Let's do this as a community. And then we hit the illusionment phase, where fear and anger and hopelessness can all set in. And this is the survivors are seeing how long of recovery this is going to be. And it is a long road to rebuild, to recover, but it's also a long time to heal, emotionally and mentally. It is a long, hard road, and hopelessness sets in at this point. They even start to feel abandoned sometimes because right as the disaster hit, people from all over may have been coming in to help, and they now are seeing the large number of people that was coming in consistently to help rebuild and come along people. That number has started to shrink. And so they start to feel abandoned. They start to feel like no one cares about them, that they're now forgotten. And then they start looking at, in the process of rebuilding their home and their community, finances comes up, and the financial strain that this is taking on them personally, their family, their community. It's just a big weight that survivors feel. And then they feel helpless because they're coming to grips with the recovery from the disaster is long. And so anger can set in, frustration can set in, disappointment can sit in, sadness can fill in, all of those feelings can sit in. And so trying to remember to normalize those feelings is so important. And this is also when you start to see PTSD and anxiety and addictions and alcohol, violence, domestic violence, all of these struggles and these mental health issues start to creep in, because people are just looking for a way to cope, to numb their feelings. And so they'll turn to addictions, they'll turn to alcohol, they'll turn to violence. But then the anxiety and the PTSD of what they've just experienced and what they're trying to walk through daily, that struggle of PTSD and anxiety is there constantly. And so some of the ways that we can come alongside, and some of the treatment things that can be offered is, one of the unique things that the video mentioned was debriefing groups, and using the community to come back together to really talk through and debrief what's going on, and debrief how everybody's doing, but pulling the community back, pockets of that community back, so that they don't feel isolated, and they hear, and they can lean on each other in this time. There's so many different needs, but even meeting a physical need and praying with them is a part of the recovery process. Survivors need to be evaluated and looked at and talked with, because PTSD is a real thing, and it does show its head after a disaster. psychological first aid can be administered. That's a great way um, to continue and start some treatment for people and help them in this road of recovery. But one thing is the road to recovery is going to be long and hard, so very long and hard. And so continuing to provide support, continuing to offer and encourage mental health services, referring people to mental health services. Churches could do something to help provide recreation outlets for people to help with stress, but also just to get that community back together, to offer some encouragement and some hope, and then to continue to build that community and not the isolation. And it's when the isolation sets in is when there's more struggles. But one of the last statements in the video that resonated with me the most was, it was along the lines of, the church has the greatest opportunity to bring people together, to bring the community together, to meet the needs. And then whenever you meet their needs, you've earned the right to tell the people about Jesus and salvation, and people are open. And so I thought that was a great way, as a disaster hits, not running in and just saying, well, you need Jesus and here's hope, but walking with them through this road of recovery, offering support all the time, providing places and people that they can talk to, referring them to counselors. The church has the opportunity to meet a physical need and then follow up and meet a spiritual need. And when a disaster hits a community or city, the devastation is huge, but hope and healing through Jesus is even bigger than that.